So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. To understand.
Atheist and agnostic as well as many.
It's been a minute since we recorded.
I suppose so, yeah.
It feels like it's been a long time.
Not that our audience would ever know, because we very reliably post every 2 weeks.
We're committed to you, and you're committed to us. Forever, here on the Holy Watermelon Podcast. That soft opening really didn't allude to what we're talking about at all, but feels good to be back from our little summery hiatus.
Right?
Even though it's December now. November?
November.
It's November now.
In case you haven't picked this up, we're recording way in advance of these releases.
So that we can release consistently here on the Holy Watermelon Podcast. I don't know what we're even doing anymore. Today we're going to talk about a controversial topic.
Yeah, kind of picking up on some themes that we'd laid out earlier this year. We've talked about fascism, nationalism, as well as socialism, communism. We talked a little bit about the religious conflict in Ireland. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to talk today, as promised previously, about some religious conflict in Israel and Palestine.
Yes, so today we're talking about Zionism. Actually, one of the things I went down the Reddit rabbit hole for this episode.
Dangerous.
A little bit. And one of them said they didn't actually like the term conflict because there is an obvious oppressor. A conflict implies that there's two sides fighting. And they didn't like the term conflict because they're saying that Israel is oppressive to Palestine. Just thoughts. Preston doesn't agree with that from his face, but...
Yeah, Israel's got a pretty uncomfortable grip on things, and people are being treated poorly. But the Palestinian Arabs have a long history of, hey, we don't like you here, let's blow you up. And so it's just kind of a constant elevating game of, no, my stick is bigger.
It's also interesting, this is basically where we're going to start, is obviously the Jewish population has been through a lot historically. So for them to be possessive of a place that is their own, I don't want to say we can't fault them because they're not being very nice over in that part of the world, but there is a very long line of generational trauma that has led to what we have today over in that part of the world. So the Oxford Dictionary defines Zionism as a movement for originally the reestablishment and now the development and protection of a Jewish nation in what is now Israel. It was established as a political organization in 1897 under Theodor Herzl and was later led by Chaim Weizmann. Thank you, someone who's taken Hebrew.
Yeah, it's not Chaim.
That's literally what I wanted to, or like Chaim.
Yeah.
The term Zionism comes from the word Zion, a hill in Jerusalem, which symbolizes the land of Israel.
There's all kinds of important historical baggage behind this word, but ultimately it's, hey, Zion is our home and we want it.
Yep. And it's important to know that there's no overarching governing body for Zionism or Zionists.
There are Zionist groups, but to say that they're all tightly affiliated and mutually governed is simply not the case.
Well, even arguably, I don't know if their goal is the same. I know the debate on how the land of the Jews would be run governed is one thing that really hasn't been decided, but they all have different motives for sure. There's a whole bunch of different types of Zionism as well.
Yeah. As we've said before, it's a spectrum. That not all Jews are Zionists, not all Zionists are Jewish. It's a huge bag of marbles.
Yep. And there might be some Zionists that are surprising to you that I think we've talked about earlier, Christian Zionism. We'll get to that later in the episode.
Yeah, Judaism is a weird sort of thing that it's generally talked about as a religious not organization, but a religious umbrella, religious group. But there's cultural and ethnic divisions as well. Hitler wasn't trying to get rid of the Jewish people because of their religion. He wanted to get rid of them because of their race. that the Jewish people as a race were inferior and problematic. Not a great position to hold, but here we are.
And it is a weird, we don't talk about the Christian race or the Muslim race. It is a...
Right.
But I've definitely met people that identify as secular or cultural Jews because of, their grandparents were Jewish. And even though they have no religious practice, they still identify as, in some way, as Jewish.
Right.
So that is also an interesting bag of marbles.
It's weird in today's globalist culture, but go back 2,000 years, it was like the Slavs or the Nords or the
totally
Greeks,
and
Romans.
There's still groups. I mean, for audience members that might not know me personally, I grew up Irish dancing, and there's like an Irish look, especially to like middle-aged Irishmen. They just look Irish. And I can say that as a white Irish person. I'm not going to say that about any other culture. But there, even with globalism, there are still groups that have a look to them. So I get it and I don't get it all at the same time. So secular Zionism is a thing where people who identify as cultural Jewish people still want a Jewish homeland.
Yeah.
So
because the people of this ethnic group have been abused so consistently for such a long time. Yeah, a nice safe place to call home. Who wouldn't want that?
And this is where it's such a difficult conflict, because we're going to start talking about the history of anti-Semitism in 2.5 seconds here. And they've been through a ton, but now they're doing terrible things to other people. So, hurt people, Preston.
Exactly.
And that's kind of how we're here. So the history of anti-Semitism is very long, like 2,000 plus years.
I mean, if you look back through their own reflection on their history, there is never a time where things are going well for them. They're always on somebody else's land, and that somebody hates them.
They're kind of the Eeyores of religion, aren't they?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. The earliest point of Hebrew history, we have them in Egypt, enslaved. And then they escape that, only to fight other people in the land that they claim as their own because they won't be good neighbors. And it just gets worse. They get enslaved. Well, not enslaved, but they get conquered by a whole bunch of, a long series of external nations. You got the Syrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans. And things are bad.
And this is all told in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah.
But we also know historically that Judaism was the first major monotheistic religion.
Yeah.
And maybe we live in the West, it's weird to think of anything other than monotheism when the majority of people are Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, and they all believe in Yahweh. That at the time, they would have been the outsiders and the weirdos only believing in one God. How can one God handle both the rain and the sun and the plants and life and death? Mm-hmm. You got to have different people for all those.
Yeah.
How do you know who to pray
to? All their neighbors looked at it.
Right? So they were already othered by just the format of their religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you were traveling from one nation to another, it was polite to go to the local worship station and offer a sacrifice.
Worship station.
Yeah.
I like that. You mean like church or shrine or...
Shrines, temples.
Worship station.
Yeah.
Like an eye wash station.
And if you went to Jerusalem and you were going to do the thing you do everywhere else, you'd get in huge trouble because you're not welcome in their temple as an outsider.
Yeah. Then what happened?
Then the temple was destroyed.
No, you're skipping ahead. So next, we all know about JC, Jesus Christ, the world's most famous Jew.
Oh, no, my thing came first.
Right. There were two destructions of the temple.
Was
Excuse
destroyed,
me.
And then they were carried off, and things were hard in Babylon and Persia. And then they got to go back home, rebuild the temple. And then Jesus. Yeah.
So the JC, world's most famous Jew.
Yeah.
Maybe not next to Moses. I think more famous than Moses.
I mean, I really hope most Christians are aware of Moses.
I was just going to make a really terrible joke. I'm going to refrain.
But, I want to say that Jesus might not be as popular as Moses because all Christians should be aware of Moses, but an awful lot of people outside of the monotheistic dome probably have heard of Jesus more than Moses, just because Christians
Fair.
are loud as hell.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, now we've debated who the most famous Jewish of all time. Jesus was crucified by Roman governor Pontius Pilate, but the Gospels blame the Jews.
Yeah.
And
Well, okay.
Preston and I have
To be real, Pontius Pilate didn't want to crucify Jesus.
We disagree
but
on
he was
this.
the authority that said, yes, let's do it.
Preston and I disagree on this. And I'll say why. I read that great book by Resna Aslan on Jesus, historical Jesus.
Yeah.
And Pontius Pilate had complaints sent to Rome about him for crucifying too many people. So I don't think he cared too much about another rebellious person.
He had been warned, if you don't stop messing around, you're going to lose your job.
Yeah.
And
that's how many people he crucified, when crucifixion was the way to do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, in Canada where we don't have the death penalty. Someone's like, let's start killing people. It's like, no, this is how we deal with people. And he was doing it too often.
Yeah.
So that's really bad.
Yeah.
So,
but the Jews demanded, this time we're serious. We want this.
So the Gospels, as they get newer, the blame gets put more and more on the Jews because Christianity was now the religion of the Roman Empire, and it can't be looking like the Romans killed JC. So they blame.
I mean,
Preston and I disagree on this, but
the books aren't so new that the Christians were in charge of the Roman Empire when they were published. There's a couple hundred years between the publication of the fourth gospel and the rise to power of Christianity.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
We should get Dr. Glenn answering this question.
Sure.
We disagree. Anyway. So, Christ killer is a slur for a Jewish person.
Yes.
Is the important point in this conversation.
Which is ridiculous because giving anybody credit for a murder that happened centuries before their own birth, fully ridiculous.
I mean, again, yes and no, because if we're still having to,
Are you defending the use of Christ killer?
No, I'm
against
not.
the Jews?
I'm not. But the way Christians treat their current people as still having to do things for Jesus because he sacrificed himself 2,000 years ago. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure that I do.
Are we going to cut this out because I'm not making any sense? We'll
Maybe.
see. Okay, because I'm reading all these books on evangelical Christianity, and it's all well, because Jesus died for your sins, you have to do X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
So if we're still caring that someone died for us 2,000 years ago, of course we should care who killed someone 2,000 years. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I follow you now.
Okay. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good thing.
Right.
But if we care what someone did for me when I wasn't born and didn't ask him to do it 2,000 years ago, ergo, I should probably care who killed the man 2,000 years ago. If I care about those two, well, the one thing I should care about the other.
See,
No?
I still don't think there's a valid equivalence,
Okay.
but
Fair.
I guess that's just me.
I mean, I'm an atheist, so it doesn't matter to me either. But like I said, if I'm going to care that someone died for me, should I not care who killed him? Or no? Okay.
I don't think it's fair to transfer the burden of the murder across peoples
Fair.
and centuries.
No, absolutely.
That's the thing.
But I can see why people do it.
Because people are simple.
Because
and dumb.
people are terrible, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we've been taught to care about this thing that happened 2,000 years ago.
Yes. Parents teach their children a lot of things they shouldn't.
Yes. So then Preston and I got ahead of myself and talked about the second destruction of the temple.
And then around 70 CE, there was enough trouble in Jerusalem that it was time to destroy the temple again. And things have just been super hard ever since.
Yep.
People are scattered across all of Europe and treated poorly everywhere they go.
Yep. So for many centuries, the Jews weren't allowed to hold land or public office or vote and were treated as aliens predominantly across Europe, I imagine through the Middle East as well.
A little bit, yeah.
We just have great records of European history all the way back to the year 1000.
Mm-hmm.
And they were also othered because the Jews take a line from Exodus 22:25 very specifically. I remember learning about this, and I thought this was great when I learned about it. So the line from Exodus 22:25 says, "If you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a money lender to him, and you shall not exact interest from him." So this is God telling people don't charge interest on loans.
Yeah. But if anyone's read the good old Merchant of Venice, the story is about a Jewish guy who charges interest.
So the Jews took this line very literally of my people, meaning other Jews.
Yeah.
And Christians take this as my people being everyone.
Yeah.
So historically, Jewish people have been bankers, become quite wealthy from it, been charged with usury, and a stereotype that still stands today as being either like money grubbing or really cheap. So no one likes paying back their loans.
Of course, things have changed a little bit since then. Now Christians love charging
No,
interest.
everyone loves charging interest. Usury is not even a thing anymore.
I mean, it is. We just don't use that word anymore because it's a normal practice.
Yeah, we don't. We're not going to send anyone. Well, we might send people to hell for it. We'll have to ask JC when the time comes. But it used to be like a really big sin. And now it's like literally I could get an extension on my credit card right now if I wanted to.
Right.
So, you want a car loan, Preston? I could get you a car loan. Like right now.
I'm pretty comfortable with my situation.
Okay. You want a car loan?
No.
3% interest.
We owe 78 cents on our car right now.
Why haven't you paid it off yet?
Amanda tried and they wouldn't let her.
Oh, I was like, I will give you 78 cents.
They're like, no, you have to wait until next month when the interest on that 78 cents makes it most of it.
Well, then give them $3.
It won't be that much. God,
I know, but just then they can't. When they can't harass you about it. Anyway, so that's how we, have Jewish stereotypes. And this is like literally happening in the year like 1000. Like this is like we obviously know about anti-Semitism in the early 1900s, but this has been going on for literally centuries. So the Jewish community was never fully accepted. They were often just tolerated. Many countries enforced segregation in Jewish ghettos. And again, this is as early as the 1000s. We hear about Jewish ghettos a lot during World War II. There have been Jewish ghettos for 1,000 years.
Yeah. Of course, one of the great titles you'll hear about in discussions of anti-Semitism is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
No!
This great book that was supposed to expose all of the terrible plots that the Jews were...
It's the great Jewish conspiracy theory. It's garbage.
Yeah, it's terrible. The Jewish plan for global domination. Well, such a small group of people pulling that off.
I mean, pre-World War I, their population, or pre-World War II, their population was much bigger. I still don't know if it's enough for world domination.
But compared to like the rest of the world, they're still a small group.
So this book was published in 1903. It is a fake text that describes the Jewish plan for global domination. It was read to school children as fact after the Nazis took over Germany in 1933.
Yeah. People suck. I mean, if you want to make people hate any group, here's a good example of how to do it.
This one, I will say, is quite interesting because, again, it was published well over 100 years ago. And if you stay in a Facebook or Reddit argument long enough, this conspiracy theory of it's the Jews will come up. And that's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, there was a conspiracy. Was the Jews? Let me tell you what the conspiracy was.
Oh, no. Now you're sounding like the sketchy one, Preston.
Because a conspiracy is a shared vision with intent to act. A whole bunch of Jews got together and said, we want to go home.
Yeah, fair.
Technically a conspiracy.
Not world domination, though. Just Katie after a night out drinking. I just want to go home.
Right? That's it. That's the conspiracy. We want a safe place to go to sleep at night.
Hasn't worked yet, unfortunately.
No. Even though they've had their own nation for most of a century now.
80 years, yeah.
It still kind of sucks.
Yep. So, modern Zionism, which led to the creation of the nation of Israel. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so let's start at where things were about 150 years ago, maybe a little bit further back than that. Jewish religious thought had always talked about returning to Jerusalem. That was always a big thing, that there would be a new Jerusalem, the temple would eventually be rebuilt. There was never any specific plans to make it happen. It was just a thing that everyone looked forward to one day. Nobody knew what circumstances it would be. It was just a thing that was hoped for. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire controlled Jerusalem and the rest of the land of Israel. And anti-Semitism was getting pretty rough in Europe, to the point that through the 1860s and 70s, people actually started talking about getting out of these unfriendly nations. That maybe, hey, let's try going home. Makes perfect sense.
Right.
So they could actually enjoy self-determination instead of being governed by people who hated them. Because they'd had enough after more than 1,000 years of that in Europe. Just terrible.
Yep.
And so it didn't take long to decide that, yeah, Jerusalem should be their refuge. A lot of people said, no, let's head off to New York. That'll work out really well for us. And for some people, it did work out. But
they
there
have a
was still
huge
that
Jewish
dream.
population.
Yeah. Yeah, huge population in New York. But a lot of them said, hey, let's go back to Jerusalem. And they started growing. The individual people and some larger nationalist groups started buying up land so that Jewish immigrants would have a place to live in the Ottoman Empire, which was ruled, of course, by Muslims. That was the majority religion. It's kind of interesting. The symbol that we have for Islam, I'll recognize everywhere, is always that moon and star. It has nothing to do with the religion. That was the symbol of the Ottoman Empire.
Yep.
So that's how the Ottomans connected to the rest of the world that way. And really the modern Zionist movement began in about 1896. Well, that was the year that Theodor Herzl published his little pamphlet, The Jewish State.
Der Jungenstaat. No, Judenstaat. Jungen is child. Der Judenstaat.
Yes. And so the argument was that an independent Jewish state would help escape anti-Semitism. We've seen this state finally erected. Turns out it didn't work. Anti-Semitism is still a problem.
Yeah, I don't think it's such a weird thing. And I'm in a place of privilege to not really talk about it, but it's one of those things where I feel like othering yourself further doesn't help anything.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm not in a place to say, but just thoughts.
Yeah. It didn't solve the problem.
Didn't solve, yeah.
Or at least not the whole problem. It did solve part of the problem, that people were able to live in a space where anti-Semitism didn't actually ruin their lives.
Yeah.
Not a perfect solution. There's still a lot of murders.
Yeah. And I mean, again, just spend a little bit of time on the internet and you'll see that anti-Semitism is still a thing, you know, day to day in your home of Israel. Can you avoid that? Probably. Just don't go on the internet. But
Right.
doesn't mean people, unfortunately, think differently.
Yeah.
Early Zionism discouraged assimilation, encouraged the revitalization of the Hebrew language. Say something for us, Preston.
My Hebrew studies were really quite light, and I'll admit that I did not attend every class when I was doing it, but I did pass in the end.
That's good. I thought you were going to say Mazel Tov.
Sure. My command of the Hebrew language is not enough to call it a command.
All right. As Jewish families and organizations bought up land and facilitated immigration into Palestine, conflict wasn't actually that frequent. Between 1882 and 1908, only 13 Jewish people, I shouldn't say only, 13 Jewish people were killed by Arab people in Palestine, but only 4 of those were because of nationalistic circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, over the course of more than 20 years, 13 murders, pretty light compared to a lot of conflicts that we see. But that's still people dying.
Yeah.
So that sucks.
Yeah.
things started to heat up even more when Jewish landowners started evicting tenants to make room for more Jewish immigrants on their land, which was technically legal, but also really sucks if you're the one being evicted.
Totally.
And so the Ottoman Empire started worrying about the possibility that all these immigrants coming in from Russia and other parts of Europe might still be loyal to those countries, publicly anti-Semitic countries.
And they're leaving because they're anti-Semitic? Probably not.
Yeah.
When we talk, I mean, even when we talk about immigration now, I'm like, it takes a lot for someone to leave their home country.
Yeah.
Like, people don't just do that lightly. So
moving house is a big deal.
Moving houses is too much. Moving countries, I can imagine.
Exactly. You're abandoning everything you know for what is absolutely uncertainty.
Yep.
High risk, but people are doing it because they need to.
Yep.
But of course, this displaces a lot of people. So back to that question of, can these Jewish immigrants even possibly be loyal to the Ottoman Empire? The Turkish people actually did have problems with the same sort of thing, of these nationalist groups breaking away from the empire. All of the Balkans used to be under Ottoman power for a while and then lost it because nationalist power. In 1892, the Ottoman government banned the sale of land to foreigners, which, I mean, makes sense when you realize a whole bunch of your property is being bought up, you're losing money. I mean, we see that today in North America. China is buying up all kinds of property. Probably not for the same reason.
No.
It's all about that money, which, you know, that's what makes
I mean,
the world
when
go
the
round.
climate crisis meets its peak and everything goes into the ocean, property values inland will skyrocket.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that is for money.
Yeah.
But you could live there too if your home's underwater elsewhere.
Sure. So this didn't actually stop people who were living there buying land and renting it to Jewish immigrants. So we still see a growing influx of ethnic Jewish people because religion wasn't the issue, even though a lot of them were faithful, religious practicing Jews.
Yes. Again, because you can't look at someone and know what their religion is.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Because the number of people that clutch their pearls at me when they find out, Preston.
Right? Because they look at you and assume, oh, she's white. She's probably Christian.
Nice white Christian girl.
Surprise,
Wrong.
atheist.
Satan. Kidding. Not even Satan.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I knew that episode number to quote that right now. Episode 37, not even Satan.
I don't think it was that.
I don't think it was that long. No. Here.
Anyway.
Then what happened?
The First World War broke out.
Oh.
Yeah. And the Ottoman Empire joined Germany. Because why not?
Losing side. Losing
I
side.
mean, I don't want to say one side is better than the other in this specific detail, that the Ottomans joined the side of Franz Ferdinand, the assassinated fella. But also, they saw great power in Germany and Austria, saw allies there, and Germany already hates Jewish people, not as much as they will 20 years from now, but at this point in history, it's a problem already.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's worth noting that an awful lot of Muslim Arabs actually don't like the Ottoman Empire. They don't like the Ottoman power. It's causing problems for them. There's lots of different factions within Islam, lots of different denominations, and some of them were treated very poorly by their government. Yay, theocracy. So things were kind of rough for a lot of people, not just the Jewish people in the Ottoman Empire. And even some of the Arabs agreed with the Jews that it would be better to ally with Russia and France and their allies.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a spectrum. Many sides, many subgroups.
Yeah.
Of course, France and their allies were really excited to split up the Ottoman Empire as soon as they could, because
it was huge.
It was huge territory. There was a lot of power there, but not enough to win a war.
Like Canada, big but spread out.
Right?
We're not winning any wars here either.
Well, also, we don't dump a full half of our funds generated every year into the armed forces like America does.
Fair.
So there's a serious military advantage on one side of that.
I looked it up once because I have a friend, our friend Sarah, and I told her what Canada budgets for military versus what the state's budgets for military, and it's gross, the difference.
Absolutely it is.
I think we budget in the billions, and they budget, I think we budget in the 2-digit billions, and they budget in the 3-digit trillions.
That's insane.
It's and that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
The difference between a billion and a trillion is a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Well, anyway.
Sorry.
So in 1915, the British government agreed to recognize the independence of individual states after the war if they agreed to rebel against the Ottoman Empire.
Interesting.
Yeah, so let's poke at this hot bed of coals and see what fires pop up. And they got their fires. The next year, 1916, France and Great Britain got support from Russia and Italy to divide the parts of the Ottoman Empire between the two powers in what is called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And England got the southern half, and France got the north half, basically. At least of the Levant region. Other things were divided a little differently, too. In 1917, the British government pronounced their intent to make a home for Jewish people in Palestine. They were pretty overt about it, and it was a little bit weird. The British government, in the Balfour Declaration, named for the British Foreign Secretary Balfour, there's actually a lot of argument around Balfour's motives. Some are like, is he trying to get people in trouble? Is he secretly a Zionist himself?
No one knows.
Yeah, we just don't know. Kind of frustrating. But the Balfour Declaration was sent from the Foreign Secretary to Baron Walter Rothschild, a Jewish lord of the British Parliament. A lot of times when people are talking about these protocols of Zion, the Rothschilds running the world, no. But the Rothschilds are part of the conspiracy to find a home.
Yep.
So we have that. Anyway, he sent it to Rothschild to take to the Zionist Federation, who then forwarded it to the press. And it's actually not terribly long. I included it in our notes.
Thank you.
Full text of the letter.
Read it.
And so it's dated November 2nd, 1917. So pretty close to the end of the war. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation.
There you go.
Yeah. Like, he didn't get in trouble for it, and the guy who took over for him supported it all the way through, but it's still like a lot of people investigating why this was written and all that. But before the end of the year, and this was in November, British forces seized Palestine and ultimately held it until they acknowledged Israeli independence a few decades later.
Yep.
It's not much of a conspiracy. It's just a concerted will and plan to find a home.
Yeah, so as Preston mentioned, the English held what is now known as Israel, Jordan, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, Kuwait, and part of Iraq, and France got Lebanon, Syria, and another part of Iraq.
Yeah, and other little parts of land here and there, but those are the big bits.
Those are the big bits, and it's interesting. I mean, is it colonialism? Kind of. It's just like how much conflict has been in that part of the world since. It's like a weird kind of colonialism.
I guess.
Because it was spoils of war.
Right.
But it's still not yours.
Well, so the thing is that the English and the French didn't actually colonize the Levant.
Right.
They just took it, controlled it, and facilitated other people immigrating.
Yeah, but that's having a government that isn't a government you wanted.
Right.
making
Yeah,
your,
they certainly weren't an elected government by the locals in this part of the
So
world.
I guess not. Yeah, it's different than colonization, but it is some sort of weird.
Yeah. I mean, still very English.
I want to say sticking your dick in places it doesn't belong. That's the best way I can describe it.
Sure. I mean, a better example of exactly that would be what the English did in India.
Yeah.
Where the more coastal you are in India, the more likely you are to have pale skin because of sticking things where they don't belong.
Oh.
But here we are.
Here we are. So immigration accelerated after the First World War. So Jewish immigration, funded mostly by English-speaking Christians, displaced more Arabs, even though they said it wouldn't.
Yeah.
But it did.
Yeah.
This, of course, made a lot of Palestinians uncomfortable because they wanted self-determination just like Jewish immigrants did. While I'm all for immigration, I don't want it to be at the cost of me. I don't want to be ousted from my own home.
Right.
I'm happy to find resources for people who are immigrating here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we see people complaining about this all the time here in the West, where people are complaining about immigrants all the time, and immigrants are taking our jobs, while simultaneously saying, no, immigrants are lazy and just to drain on things. You cannot be both ways.
Canada, that's like... I was talking to some friends about this that are also business owners, and we were talking about the States versus Canada, where the States has this massive population, and actually makes it really hard to do business in Canada because there's not enough people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people don't think it's worth doing business outside of the United States.
Yeah.
No matter where in the world they're at.
Yeah, because there's just not enough people.
It's ridiculous.
So I'm fine with more
where there are people, there is money to be made.
And money to be spent, and people are buying things more.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't think we have to worry about that in Canada yet when our entire population is like the population of New York State.
Right.
Anyway.
So here we see nationalism starting to build up within this new set of almost nations. And of course, you have the immigrating Jewish people and the now
existing, but
fairly not fully oppressed, but they're not really being helped much, Palestinian Arab population. They both really lean into nationalism. And because their ideals conflict with one another, neither group's going to be satisfied with either of them in power.
Yeah.
Things just get worse. Nationalism is always bad. Always. I cannot think of any exception.
In the 1920s, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, a Muslim, incited conflict by telling the Arabs that the Jews were going to destroy the Dome on the Rock so that they could rebuild their own temple. And this is actually like a big part of the conflict, is that the Dome on the Rock is a very religious Muslim place, but it is where the temple is.
Right. But I couldn't find anything saying that any Jew had said that they were planning to blow up the Dome on the Rock.
Oh, interesting. I thought that was a big part of the conflict, is that is the most holy place in the world.
I mean, yeah, but the Grand Mufti
is the guy who
just accused the Jewish people at large, in general, of wanting to blow up the Dome on the Rock so they could rebuild the temple.
Where would they build the temple?
No, that is the location, but
nobody's ever...
No group of Jewish people in power have ever made any plans to do that.
It doesn't help that Christians also.
Christians talk about blowing up the Dome on the Rock all the time.
Interesting.
All the time. I heard it so often in the last 20 years. It's insane.
That's probably where I'm getting this idea from.
Probably. Because it seems like a natural, effective way of rebuilding the temple. Get rid of what's there. It's not like there's a whole lot of love between most Christian groups and all of Islam. So it's an easy thing for a lot of people who are completely separate from the scenario to talk about. And since most of the world has a violent history, what's another bombing? Apart from, actual murder.
You know what I like? Nihilism.
Sure.
In 1937, after the conflict had gotten really rough with lots of deaths on both sides, the Peel Commission recommended a two-state solution. The Zionist Congress approved the plan, but the Arabs didn't want to share the land. The English weren't too keen on the idea either because it would essentially force countless families to relocate.
Yeah.
I was actually in one of my rabbit holes I went down. They actually are saying that the two-state solution is not the most popular one right now.
Yeah.
And for a lot of years it was. Like, if you would ask me, and I mean, I didn't try not to go down this rabbit hole too far, but, you know, for the longest time I was like, yeah, separate them. So it's interesting to me that it's no longer the most popular idea.
Well, it's kind of interesting that in popular media in the last, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot more people telling their stories about the partition of Pakistan and India. Mm-hmm. And that it was just
devastating. Devastating, yeah.
And that it was the exact same plan in the exact same year in Israel. And things didn't go well there.
Interesting. And that's a good comparison to make, yeah, because that really was not good.
Yeah. A forced partition of nations where you have a winning group and a losing group who's still within your borders who now desperately want to escape for their lives. That sucks.
Yep.
But we'll get into the governmental bits of that a little bit later on.
We haven't even got to World War II yet.
Yeah.
In 1939, the British government implemented their one-state plan and banned Jews from buying land from Arabs. The intent was to stop the conflict by helping the Palestinian Arabs feel more secure. Jews started immigrating illegally, making things worse. A handful of Jewish rebellions started up because of these British policies.
Yeah, things didn't get better with these new laws. And then World War II broke out, and again, the Arabs allied with Germany. Because, hey, Germany's got this great doctrine of Jews are awful, and we also feel exactly this way. It's not a great reason to join a war, and it's not a great reason to pick such a terrible ally, but it was what they did.
They also overlooked something pretty important.
Yeah, the Jews were super anti-Semitic in general. Arabs are part of the Semitic family.
Yeah.
But Germany went along with it well enough.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend?
I guess. The Grand Mufti, the same one who incited public panic about the destruction of the Dome on the Rock, called for a holy war against the United Kingdom. Because, United Kingdom's the cause of all our problems recently. And so Hitler promised him that he would wipe out the Jews in Palestine after he had won the war in Europe. So he tried real hard in Europe, but he didn't win.
That's good.
Agreed.
That's a different world I don't want to live in. Yeah. And even that, I mean, do I want to live in this world? And this is something that, I remember learning about Israel being created in 1948, 47. But we talk, 1948. But, the Bible talks about the nation of Israel. And I was like, what do you mean Israel wasn't a country until 1948? But it wasn't.
Not technically.
No. So because of the Holocaust, an event that killed 6 million Jews, many Jewish people sought refuge in Palestine and really started to embrace the idea of Zionism. If they hadn't already, losing all your loved ones sure brought that home.
Yeah.
Forgive the pun, but there was a huge exodus of Jews. I'm so sorry. From Europe to Israel. So 57% of Jews lived in Europe. Of the world's population of Jews lived in Europe before World War II. Afterwards, only 35% resided in Europe. And that's also obviously removing the deaths.
Yeah.
So huge population drop.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that wasn't emigration. A lot of that was extermination, but there was also an emigration.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So in 1947, the United Nations recommended a partition of the state, and this time Britain agreed. And it was the same year that they did the whole Pakistan-India partition, so I guess just different people in the Foreign Secretary's office, I guess. Palestine was only 1/3 Jewish in 1947. But the Jewish people were awarded most of the land, and then Jerusalem was a separate state as well, as its own city-state.
Kind of like the Vatican.
Kind of, yeah. Under the control of the United Nations.
I'd also like to just remind everyone that the UN is literally a baby right now.
Yeah, this is a very new organization.
Yeah. After the League of Nations failed and we had another world war.
Yeah. So this idea of partition, it went not half as well as it did in Pakistan. War broke out immediately. No hesitation, not like weeks later, immediately.
The 1947 to 49 Palestine War was the first conflict of what we have today.
Yeah. I mean, first feels a little bit weird, but the way we define the warfare that's going on there. Yeah.
And I mean, it was the first conflict of the nation of Israel, and it has not stopped since. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I get you. And so it was called the War of Independence by those in Israel, and it finished with the Independence Day, May 14th, 1948, thanks to Great Britain and their help in keeping some control over the situation that, honestly, they didn't have any real right to get involved in.
And this is where it gets complicated, because a group of people that we can be really sympathetic to after thousands of years of oppression, now the tables are turning. So this war displaced more than 700,000 Palestinian Arabs.
Not counting the ones who died.
Not counting the ones who died, just all of some people who had nowhere to go.
Yeah, let's head off to other nations.
So again, the Jewish population has just had however many years of World War II. My husband would know that answer. I don't know that answer. And been displaced in atrocities. And now, I mean, obviously they weren't put into concentration camps, but creating 700,000 refugees is a huge problem.
Yeah, and then Palestinian Arab rebels continue to illegally claim dominion over pretty much the same area that was legitimately granted to them in 1947, despite having lost the war. And then in 2012, the UN granted observer status to Palestine, officially recognized them as a state of their own.
But it is not a country.
Not technically speaking. No. It's funky. It's like...
It is. Wales.
Well, it's an interesting separate example. I want to say it's more like North and South Korea.
Fair. Yeah, that's a good one.
There's no reason for anybody on the planet to recognize two separate Koreas. There is one Korea with one capital city and a rebel state that controls the other half of the nation. Yeah. To be honest in your politics means to be friendly with one and just not recognize the other. Trump decided to make friends with the fascist half.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
No, again, this one's harder than North and South Korea, though. It's harder... You know, like I said, with the long history of Jewish oppression, right. Like who's the air quotes bad guy in this one? Whereas we know North Korea is just the bad guy. Not the people, just later.
Right. Well, and we don't have such a easy border between the two like we have in Korea. We have people all over the place. Like, yeah, there's borders drawn up, but that's not actually a fair outline of where these people really are. Yeah. It's actually really... a big problem. So in 1947, I think it was, we had 1/3 of the population were Jewish. Yeah. Today, 75% of all the people in Israel are Jewish. Out of the whole global population, more than 40% live in Israel.
Wow.
That shows a lot of population movement in those 80 years.
And we've just, I know we talked about this previous episodes, but I'll just reiterate, we've now hit the number of Jews in the world that is pre-World War II losses.
Yeah.
So the population is finally recovered.
Yeah. Which, to say recovered, it doesn't mean where they could have fairly expected to have
right,
been.
if you...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the Thanos snap. Solve all the world's problems by cutting the population in half. Our population has fully doubled. The human population on this planet has fully doubled since my parents were born.
I don't like that.
So if we were to snap half of the world's population away...
In 40 years, we'd be back.
I mean, my parents aren't
Oh,
that young.
50.
My parents are in their 50s, yeah. So that's not even setting us back a whole 100 years.
Yeah.
That means the problem comes back very
really
quickly.
Yeah. I know people were talking about that with Biden wanting to get rid of student debt. That if he wiped out the debt, then the rate would, in like 4 years, would be back to what it was.
Probably.
So, anyway. Numbers, man.
It's also interesting that nearly half of the Jewish population in Israel, not religious at all. They did their census. Turns out 49% had no real religious inclination. They
So
just
again,
were,
these ethnic, cultural Jews that
exactly.
we talk about.
They specifically, 49 responded on the survey as secular Jews.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the things that benefited the growth of the Jewish population in Israel is the law of return, which I find super interesting. Mm-hmm. Every Jew in the world has an unrestricted right to immigrate to Israel and become a citizen.
Yeah.
If you can prove you're Jewish, you can move to Israel.
Yeah, through any family ties, which of course come through the mother's side, legally speaking. But if you convert to Judaism, you can actually go ahead and get your Israeli passport.
Yeah, you need your rabbi to, I presume, to vouch for you. Because they don't just give passports out. But
no, and converting to Judaism is not nearly as easy as converting to Christianity.
No, it's interesting. Of the three Abrahamic religions, Judaism is the only one that's not evangelical.
Yeah. There's
and obviously
they're pretty suspicious of converts.
Yes, I mean obviously there's a spectrum of everyone who will knock on your door and try to convert you, or people who just like want to tell you the good word or whatever, but they actively do not want you to join them because they believe they're God's people and you're chosen.
Yeah. So. Of course, there's a spectrum. I definitely got tracts from Jews for Jesus when I was in New York one time.
Oh wow!
So spectrum.
Buy our shirt. And then what I find even more interesting and moderately terrifying is Christian Zionism.
Yeah. So Jews don't generally talk out loud in front of strangers about, oh yeah, let's blow up the Dome on the Rock so that we can rebuild the temple. I have no idea. I've lost track of how many Christians I've come across who think that this should be a plan that we need to act on soon.
Maybe you should hang out with different Christians.
I mean, I'm trying. It's been a little while since I've heard anybody say it, but that means it can't be far around the corner either.
That's true. Just want to like put a random Christian in front of you and see where the conversation goes.
Some people really like war.
War. What is it good for?
The economy.
No, you're...
Absolutely nothing.
Say it again.
Absolutely nothing. If the economy is just rich dudes' yachts, that's fine. Get that away from me. So, yeah, in the 1830s, even before the Jewish people were even making any serious plans about returning to Jerusalem, because remember we talked about that was like 1850s, 1860s when they really started thinking about it. 20 years before that, Joseph Smith, the founder of the Latter-day Saint movement, would talk about the gathering of Jews in Palestine. And he even sent church leaders there to bless the land for such a gathering.
Wow.
Yeah. Of course, for the Latter-day Saints, the New Jerusalem isn't on the land of Old Jerusalem. It is here in North America. So a little different than the standard Christian idea of, hey, we need to pave and just get rid of everybody in the way so that things can be what they are in the Bible. Because, yay, that's the thing people think about.
That is the thing people think about. This is why this gets really scary. So American evangelicals in particular are huge supporters of Israel in this ongoing conflict. Evangelical groups have raised millions of dollars for settlements on the West Bank, and the West Bank is a strategically critical area of the conflict surrounding Jerusalem. So
yeah, if you were to put
Palestinians will put up a tent and Israelis will put up, and they just try to wiggle each other out of there. Yes. Much more violently than that, but wiggle each other out of there.
Yeah, it's terrible. Jerusalem, if you were to put it in the center of a clock, less than half of that arc of the circle would be actual Israel, and the majority would be West Bank. Like they're really serious about making sure that the people they want can control the land. Totally. Which I mean, that's most groups, I guess. But Christian outsiders can keep their hands off of it. Thank you very much.
But Preston, why do Christians want the Jews to have the West Bank?
Christian Zionists, and to be fair, a fair bit of Jewish people, believe in biblical prophecy that there will be a gathering of the Jews in Israel as a prerequisite for the coming of the Messiah, or the second coming of Jesus. Premillennialists believe that the Jews have a right to the land of Israel. It sounds fair without context. With context, super complicated.
Because people live there.
Right.
And people deserve to live there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if it's ever going to happen that Jesus is going to have his 1,000-year reign on earth and have that as his capital city, then they need to control that land.
We need the Jews, and we need the temple. Do we need the temple rebuilt before Jesus comes, or will Jesus rebuild the temple?
The temple has to be rebuilt before Jesus comes.
So that's why they need to. Okay.
Which, of course, means wiping out what's there. Not great.
Nope. Seems like a really dumb reason to kill people to me, but I could be wrong.
I mean, there's better reasons to kill people.
Wow, Preston.
There are better reasons to kill people than over ideas that are based in a tradition that can't actually be validated empirically.
Wow, that's interesting to hear from a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and that's why I don't kill people over religion. Also, because it's morally bankrupt.
Fair. And it's contradictory to the religion most often. I've not seen a religion yet that says kill peopling is good.
Right.
Killing people is good. Kill peopling.
Thanks for that.
Thanks.
So a lot of this comes from the prophecy of Ezekiel, which gets basically repeated in the Revelation of John, that talks about a city-state called New Jerusalem that I mentioned before, that apart from the Latter-day Saints, most people are just like, yes, a renewed city of Jerusalem, and the temple will be there on Mount Zion. So, I mean, the whole apocalyptic literature genre is all about things are going to be good for us again, and we'll have a home, and God's going to wipe out the people who are being so mean to us for so long. So it makes sense that this becomes part of the national tradition, the religious tradition. But to say there's no flaws in this playing out in real life, that's problematic.
But it is terrifying how much money and arms get sent.
Absolutely.
Because of this prophecy.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
LDS believe that New Jerusalem will be in North America.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why we have Zion National Park in Utah? Is that what we Mount Zion?
So
is that where we think Jesus will be?
No.
No.
That's just
or the temple. Just we call it Zion because it's pretty.
It's so for Latter-day Saints, Zion is wherever the people are. And so ideally in Latter-day Saint thought, the whole world should be Zion. It is the pure in heart. It is the people of God, which ideally would be the whole world. And
Jesus ain't going to be picky. Maybe that's what he's waiting for all to just love each other and build him a new temple anywhere.
Well,
he's got a long way.
People suck, so it'll be a while.
Wow. That's probably the secret.
Probably.
I think I got it figured out, guys. Should start my own church.
The San Lenatus Fellowship?
Yes. Today.
The Church of the Holy Watermelon?
Church of the Holy Watermelon. Cool. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
Because I was curious.
So we talked about nationalism before, and we can't really do this whole thing without getting back into it. Israel is very proud of what they've accomplished, most of it with a lot of outside help. And they see the return to Jerusalem as their own manifest destiny, which is, of course, a really troubling slogan of American nationalism. The Israeli Declaration of Independence identifies the state as a Jewish state, but not as a theocracy, but specifically as a home for all Jews. All Jews are welcome, and this is home. The Israeli government isn't theocratic, though there was an attempt in 1984 to make it a theocratic nation. In the absence of a constitution, they thought they could get away with it. That didn't work out so well for them. There is not any state religion, though, there's always that hope for the Messiah in the future. But in 1984, some new laws were put in place that no person or list of people can participate in the election if they can be connected to any of the following actions or goals. Number 1, negation of the state of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. If you want to make Israel not Jewish, you're going to have a hard time. Wow. You don't get to run for office. If you want to hurt democracy, not cool, not going to happen.
That's fine.
Yeah.
First one.
It's a good step against fascism.
Yeah.
Because there's always that dictatorial nature of fascism that steps in. Number 2 is incitement to racism. If you want to say, I don't like Arabs, bam, no public office for you.
Okay, well, that's good. I like that.
And number 3 is support for armed struggle by a hostile state or terrorist organization against the state of Israel.
This feels like one step back.
No.
I could get it.
If you support armed struggle against the state of Israel, you don't get to hold public office in Israel. That makes perfect sense to me. I can't argue against that.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't see any holes in that. Anyway, this whole thing is intended to keep Israel's obviously nationalist tendencies from sliding into overt fascism.
Good, because they know how bad fascism can be.
Yeah. Nationalism is just baby fascism. And
got its little training wheels on.
Yeah. And they're still riding that bike. But they've got things in place to keep them from getting super fascist or even ultra nationalist, which is a good thing. And then, of course, there's the Palestine Liberation Organization, who have caused their share of problems. Their charter states that it is a national duty to purge the Zionist presence from Palestine. But because nationalism is taught in Israeli schools, this does extend to literally every Jewish person. So let's wipe out the Jews. This is a really bad policy.
Yeah. But hurt people, right?
Exactly.
They've been oppressed for 80 years.
Yeah. Palestinian Arabs are not satisfied that they are guaranteed religious, political, or economic liberty under Jewish rule. Even though they're written into law, they just don't feel secure there.
Well, when you're only 1/4 of the population, what are even the chances you get in?
Right. Things are tough.
Yep.
But is it fascist? Is it even too close to that line?
I don't know, Preston. You tell me.
So back when we were talking about fascism, Umberto Eco gave us a really good list in 1995. I'll just get through the bullet points of what we had talked about in a previous episode. Umberto talked about the cult of tradition. Kind of, maybe. It depends on who you talk to. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes, not so much.
Yeah, let's keep going, because there's like a solidarity that might not be tradition, but there's a solidarity.
Yeah.
I can see people saying it's...
Right. Yeah. Remember, if...
It's like when we, stick with our families, even sometimes when our families are garbage people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's less solidarity because of tradition. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, a couple of red flags on this list may or may not mean they're fascist. Depends on the point.
Just like the bite model.
Yeah.
Everything checks off. Our podcast checks off the bite model. A couple things. We're not a cult. But you get free watermelon if you join.
It's a good deal.
Yeah.
But if we see too many of these checked off, then we can say, yes, the state of Israel is fascist. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. So, all right. Cult of tradition, maybe. Next.
Yeah. The rejection of modernism. Not so much.
Okay.
Like, there's still a part of their legal system that is the biblical law. But I wouldn't call that a rejection of modernism. There's still plenty of good modernism in Israel. Next, we have the cult of action for action's sake. I've never heard that accusation against them. I don't think that's a problem, unless I'm missing out on something. You know of anything?
I would say in some of the more violent factions that are on the West Bank.
Right.
Like right in the heart of it, probably, but your average everyday Jew in Jerusalem, probably not.
Right, and not in the government either.
Oh, okay, we're talking about government.
I mean, mostly.
Okay.
But the people as a whole, too.
Okay.
Disagreement is treason. I don't think so. Democracy is still really important to the people in Israel. And even the people in charge, not just the people who vote. And like written into their laws fairly recently, even. Mm-hmm. Next on our list, fear of difference. I mean, for some people, yes. But by and large, I've not seen. I wouldn't know in the government, but I think there's some othering of the Arabs versus the Jews. Yeah, for sure. But that's a little different than just outright fear of what is different, I think.
Okay.
There's appeal to a frustrated middle class. Yeah, sometimes maybe. I mean, an awful lot of politicians lean into that when they're running for office. Hey, I'm going to help the middle class. I'll accept that as a thing that can be terrible, but is not in itself strictly a big problem. And I can only say probably sometimes, maybe. As far as the Israeli situation goes. Next on our list, we have the obsession with a plot and the hyping up of an enemy threat. Here, the othering of the Palestinian Arabs, absolutely a problem. And they are painted as a constant dangerous enemy. A problem. Yeah. Definitely a big red flag on this list.
Yeah.
In fact, our first for sure big red flag. Next on our list, we have fascist societies rhetorically cast their enemies at the same time too strong and too weak. Maybe? I mean, it depends on who you talk to.
I feel like I'd say probably, especially if you're talking about like indoctrination of younger people on both sides.
Yeah.
I'd say probably.
Next is pacifism is trafficking with the enemy because life is permanent warfare. There must also always be an enemy to fight. I mean, there's always going to be Arabs in the area, so...
So, yes.
So, yeah, this one's a decently solid red flag. At least has the perpetual potential. And probably might even be worse than I think it is. Is there a contempt for the weak? Sometimes. I don't know if it's ever as bad as we saw it in Germany, but... I don't know. It's not a complaint I've specifically heard of either, but maybe. All right, we're getting close to the end of this list that Umberto Eco gave us. He says, everybody is educated to become a hero. This one's kind of a tricky one. That military service is mandatory for all Jewish adults, male or female. Whereas for Druze men and Circassian men, they're also conscripted, but not their women. And Christians and Muslims are also never conscripted. So
interesting. So there is a weird Jewish army being built. I shouldn't say that. Oh, weird. That sounded more anti-Semitic than I meant it to be. There is a Jewish army being built.
I mean, yeah. For a long time, it's been a conscripted army.
Interesting.
Machismo, where everything that's not the straight man is... gay is a problem for the nation. I mean, homophobia is definitely still a problem there.
I mean, it's I guess we said it's not super religious, but I think it has the feel of being ultra religious, even if you're not religious.
A little bit.
So between the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians, yeah, it's probably.
But thanks to this whole women are conscripted into the army if they're Jewish, Israeli women kick ass.
Fair.
And that does help kind of negate machismo a little bit. At least sometimes it's got to. Of course, my perspective is definitely maybe not the perfect perspective on this particular...
Because you're...
Because I'm a straight man attracted to women.
Fair. White Christian man in Canada.
Yeah.
I don't get any say in this.
Fair.
I don't get much more say.
Yeah. The next thing on Umberto's list is selective populism. I mean, the way he describes what that means is that a dictator gets to interpret the will of a diverse people. And there have been some presidents and prime ministers who have been not great guys. But I don't think that it's gotten to this point really bad yet, to the point that it creeps up on fascism, I think. And the whole newspeak thing is the last thing on Umberto's list, where people are forced into a dumber language to prevent independent thought. Not an issue.
No.
Even religiously, the Jewish people are quite diverse and are allowed to speak out, which is really helpful.
I mean, Jewish people are known for debating.
Yeah, that's the entire rabbinical principle, is let's argue about the law. So I don't think, we had suggested before, is it fascist, is it not? I think the answer is no, but that's pretty nationalist.
I was going to say, doesn't mean there isn't a conflict.
Yeah. No, there's still a problem.
A huge problem that I don't know how it's going to be solved.
I mean, we've talked about all the history and why there's a variety of what you might call the aggressors. It's complicated and it sucks, and there is no easy solution.
Everyone should just put down their weapons and go home and eat a meal with their family.
Where is home?
I don't know, Preston.
That's the problem. Like we talked about in Ireland, I don't feel like this is a religious conflict. It's super easy to say it's religious.
I was going to say it started as religious, but it did. It did and it didn't. Well, no, because Hitler didn't care if you were a religious Jew or not.
Right. Well, and all
historically,
of the Jewish people,
people
that were suffering under anti-Semitic governors, they just wanted to get out because they were being tortured for their heritage. Not just their religious heritage, but their ethnic heritage.
Yeah.
So, as easy as it is to say, yeah, religion is at fault here, I really don't think it is. Mm-hmm.
No, but I think that it adds fuel to a flame.
Sure.
Right? We look at the evangelical Christians setting money and arms over.
Yeah, that does.
That's religion making it worse.
Anytime you have any person or group of people saying, God is on my side, that makes things worse. Every time.
Yes. It's also so funny to me that they all believe in the same God. And
yeah. But they interpret their God differently and believe different things about their gods, that it's pretty hard to say they really are the same God.
Fair. Well, we said a quote, I don't even remember what episode it was, but it might have been our Ireland episode, that today God is Jewish or today God is Muslim, depending on what happens in the conflict that day. Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely our Irish episode. Yeah. Today God was Protestant.
Right? Yeah, it's so beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough.
The world is a messed up place, and it doesn't get better when people want to make it worse for other people.
Yeah. But I think even after the political, socioeconomic gets solved, I'm going to speak about this optimistically, at the end there will be left a religious debate.
Sure.
It might not be violent, but there's still the Dome on the Rock to deal with.
Yeah.
Like, for all of the Abrahamic religions, they all have some stake in that game.
Absolutely.
So I'd say it is symmetrical in that it was religious. It is not religious now and will become religious at its end.
Sure.
Because that'll be what's left.
Okay.
Again, optimistically thinking that we can solve these socio-political, economic, land rights, racism.
It's all a mess.
And get it down to where we have people having a civil conversation about what to do with the Dome on the Rock. Well,
the giant space that is on the top of Mount Zion, which is bigger than it was originally thanks to the landscaping of King Herod, there is space to build what is effectively actually quite a small temple if it's the same size as Solomon's original temple on that mount without displacing
the Dome on the Rock. Interesting.
But that doesn't mean that everyone wants that to happen.
Right. Again, once we have bigger problems to solve before we get to that.
Yes, much bigger problems.
Unless someone solves that for them, which would be terrible.
Christian Americans very likely will one day solve that problem for them, which is an alarming idea, and I'm very uncomfortable with it. But
as we
here we are.
Well, that was a depressing end to our episode. Can we pick this back up?
I kind of want to celebrate that some people have found a home, but also that's still a mixed bag too.
Yeah, because at what cost, Preston?
Exactly.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it was legit, above board. Let's move in. Let's buy up some land.
Again, yeah, they
And then
needed
things
to.
got gross.
Yeah. Well, you know what always makes me feel better, Preston?
Hanging out with friends.
I was actually going to say shopping, but that
Sure.
too. Shopping makes me feel better.
Yeah.
So if you're depressed after this episode, wow, this is a great sales pitch.
Check out our spread shop. Buy some merch.
Buy some merch. And if you don't want some merch, join our Patreon. We have a bunch of bonus episodes on there, early releases of all our regular episodes. And hopefully we have some more treats and goodies for you coming down the pipe as well on Patreon.
Yeah. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram. Join us on Discord. Follow us on YouTube. All kinds of fun places to get some more social content. Join the discussions that we have. Check out the great memes.
I come and stay for the memes.
Right? So much fun. Anyway, thanks for joining us.
Peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself.
God is near.